On today's episode, we'll be talking about lost loved ones, ESP, and much more. All coming up on this edition of Midweek Mysteries. Thank you for joining me and welcome. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. Before we start, I'd like to say thank you to Ariana, Ricard, and Pat for their support and generosity. If you enjoy the show, please remember to subscribe, share, and review the podcast. This supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. And if you'd like to support us even further by becoming a patron or by donating, please visit us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. These links and others can be found in the show notes. And if you've encountered the paranormal and would like to share your story, please email me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com. All experiences, no matter how big or small, are always welcome. And with that in mind, our first midweek mystery comes to us from Olga. And Olga says, "Hey Nick, I stumbled upon your podcast around September of 2020. It was the very first podcast I listened to, and I got hooked immediately. I have a bunch of stories to share that happened to me throughout my life. Interestingly enough, after I started listening to your podcast, I had the most profound experience and weird goings-on, so I had to stop listening for some time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I am now listening again. I keep telling myself that I have an overactive imagination, and what I experienced after I started listening to your podcast is just a coincidence, plus my imagination. Almost right off the bat, I became jumpy at sounds and scared of the dark, even though before I could walk through our house at night without turning on a single light. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, which I dismissed, but then it became a bit more. I would sit at my workspace with my earphones on, and I would see the shadow of my mom emerge from her room and stand at the top of the stairs. Annoyed, I would turn to her to tell her to just go down, only to see that there was no one there. Then I would be standing in the kitchen washing the dishes, seeing out of the corner of my eye my cat pass by me, and a minute later, see her laying in a tray all the way in the living room, in the opposite direction I saw her pass by me. One evening, my cat all of a sudden jumped off the armchair and stared at something in the hallway. She then hid under the sofa, all while staring at the same direction. My daughter and I got spooked and tried to laugh it off, and the cat remained hidden under the sofa, even after my husband came down from the second floor and through the hallway where my cat was staring, and my cat remained glued to the spot. She stayed there for a good couple of hours. She had never done this before nor since. The most disturbing experience that made me stop listening to the podcast happened shortly thereafter. I started waking up at night for no particular reason, scared out of my mind. One night I suddenly awoke, terrified. I wanted to scoot over to my husband, but I was not able to move a single muscle in my body. My eyes were closed, and I was not going to open them because I remembered all the stories of your listeners, and I would have lost my mind if I actually saw something. I tried screaming and waking my husband to help me, but I was not able to. I finally willed my finger to move, and after that, the paralysis just dissipated. Without opening my eyes, I scooted over to my husband and forced myself to calm down and go to sleep. Several nights later, I woke up to my iPhone lighting up on the nightstand. I looked at the time, and it was 3:05 a.m., and no notifications of any kind were popping up. The phone had just lit up. All of the above made me stop listening to your podcast. However, about 2 months later, I decided to start listening again. It was such a weird coincidence then that when I pressed play, the first thing I heard, and with the volume all the way up, which I never have on my phone, was you saying, "Olga." I jumped. It was the part when you thank the patrons of the podcast. Here are the other experiences that have happened to me. The earliest experience that I can recall is with the shadow figure. I was about 11 years old and was staying at home overnight by myself. I was used to being at home since I was 7, but never overnight. That evening I was going from the kitchen to the living room through the hallway, and we had a large mirror on the wall. As I was crossing the hall, I saw a black figure of a man in the mirror. It was as if the figure was cut out from black cardboard, not three-dimensional. No colors, just pure black. I knew it was a man, and it was standing still. I just flew by the hallway and stayed in the living room with lights on all night, not daring to go to sleep. Even as I type this, I have goosebumps. The second experience I can recall is a happier one. It happened a year or so after the first one. We had a pup who was a Spaniel and Dachshund mix called Cliff. He used to come to my room in the mornings, walk on my legs, and eventually curl up on my feet until I would get up in the morning. So, one morning, Cliff jumped up on my bed, walked around in circles, and eventually curled up. I was very sleepy still, so after I settled in, I fell back to sleep. But when I woke up, I had to scratch my head. Cliff had died about a month earlier, and I was inconsolable for a week. Maybe he came back to tell me that he was all right. The last experience I want to share happened about 10 years ago. It was early morning on a Sunday, and I was doing laundry. Our washer and dryer were near my daughter's room. She was about 1.5 back then, and still could not speak. She was just blabbing. The door to her room was closed, and I heard her blab away, so I popped my head in and saw her sitting on her bed, looking directly in front of her, at a closet. It looked as if she was talking to someone. I got freaked out, but decided to just shrug it off. That same weekend, I celebrated my 30th birthday. Midway through the party, I called back home to the Ukraine to talk to my grandfather, who was a father figure to me, as my dad was not in the picture ever since I was about 7. Due to the time difference between Canada and the Ukraine, my mom told me that my grandfather was resting, and he was also ailing, so I didn't really think anything of it. On Monday, my mother called me to tell me that my grandfather passed away on Friday, and when I called on the weekend on my birthday and asked to talk to my grandfather, they were having his funeral. It took me a while to recover from it, and later on I connected the passing of my grandfather and my daughter blabbing away in her room. Maybe it was nothing, but I think that my grandfather came to visit his granddaughter for the last time. Sincerely, Olga. Our next story of the night comes to us from Chris, and Chris's story is called Meeting My Senses. Chris says, "Hello, Nick. I'm a new listener to your podcast, and I absolutely love your content. I wanted to share my experience with a dark entity, and this is my story. One summer day in 2011, my stepbrother and I came across this old house out in the middle of nowhere, and we could tell that it was abandoned. We contacted the sheriff's office and got permission to enter the house, and upon entering the house, I had a cold chill run down my spine. The inside of the house looked as if a tornado went through it, and I kept having a feeling as though we were being watched. As my brother was exploring the downstairs of the house, something kept telling me to just go upstairs, so I did. Upon approaching the upstairs, I saw that it was clean compared to the downstairs, which, to be honest, shocked me. My brother soon came to the upstairs of the house, and I saw this ball that looked as though it was made of marble. I picked it up and took a close look at it, and after what seemed like only a few seconds, I started smelling smoke. I asked my brother about it, and he said he couldn't smell anything. I then put the ball down and looked up, and I saw smoke coming from under the door of one of the rooms in the upstairs. I freaked out, but my brother still said that he didn't see or smell anything. But me being curious about it, I approached the door and opened it. And I will never forget what I saw. The entire room was on fire. I then started to hear screams like someone was in the burning room, and as I looked towards the back of the room, I saw a cross on the wall, and it was burning more than the room itself. I knew I couldn't just be seeing things because I could feel the heat from the fire. I then freaked out and bolted out the door, leaving the house. My brother to this day says that there was no fire, and there was no screaming, and no smoke. Later that night, when my parents laid down to go to bed, their alarm clock started going off. It was one of those radio alarm clocks. My mom had set it on beep, but it was playing the radio. It played what sounded like 3 different stations at once, but none of them were close stations, like when you get sometimes when you were going out of one station's range. It played stations that were far apart, like 97.5, 103.3, and 107.9, which are all radio stations here in Iowa that are in different areas of the state. The digital numbers on the clock flicked so fast that the only numbers that were solid were the numbers 666. My mom then unplugged the alarm clock, and it kept going for a good 30 seconds, and soon after, I did an EVP session, during which I apologized for entering the home, and we did get a response from the EVP that said, "Never come back." Then the activity stopped as far as I know. A month or two later, that house was demolished, and to this day, I never go back down that road. I wonder if anyone else has had an experience like mine. Thanks again, Chris. Our next story of the night comes to us from Daniel, and Daniel's story is called Ghostly Girl. Daniel says, "Hi. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for your podcast, which I listen to every week. Listening to other people's stories has made me want to share my own. My experience happened when I was in high school around 11 or 12 years old. Over 25 years ago now, I studied at an all-boys school, which made my experience stick with me. I went out on lunch break with my friends to play soccer like most days. Nothing seemed unusual, and I was having fun as always. And shortly after starting the play, the ball was passed to me and I scored. Running back to celebrate with my friends, I noticed that everybody seemed to freeze still, and at first I thought it was a prank, but I noticed that the rest of the field also seemed to be still. Looking back at my friend, I noticed a figure of a small girl, maybe 5 or 6 years of age, in what I can only describe as a Victorian-style flowery dress. She seemed completely out of time, too young to be at high school, and certainly not an all-boys school. I maintained eye contact for what seemed to be 30 seconds. All seemed back to normal, and I was in the same position I had run to when my friends first froze. A couple of months after the incident, I was speaking to my grandma, and she had told me about her sister, who had died when she was just a little girl in her school, and even mentioned a flowery dress that she had when she was at school. I had never heard this story before, and it freaked me out even more. This will never leave me, and it was the start of some major sleeping issues in my childhood. I remember explaining this to doctors when I was younger, but I was always told that I must have imagined it. Whether I did or not doesn't matter to me. It will stick with me for the rest of my life. Daniel. Our next story of the night comes to us from Christine, and Christine's story is called Final Farewell. Christine says, "Hi Nick, I stumbled upon your podcast over a month or so ago, and have been listening ever since. I wanted to share my story or experience with you and your listeners. I am glad that I get to share this with people who are open-minded and who may have had the same experiences. Here is my story. My best friend passed away shortly after Christmas of 2015. I did not get to say goodbye. In fact, I have a lot of guilt for not responding to his good morning text that morning. I had just come home from a red-eye flight early that Monday morning, and I really wasn't in the mood in engaging in any sort of conversation with anyone. I just wanted to be left alone. I was tired and cranky. In hindsight, I should have responded to him. Anyway, that afternoon I was notified by one of my coworkers that he was found unconscious in his home by his family. He was taken to the ICU. He was without oxygen for approximately 40 minutes, and brain damage unfortunately had set in. We knew he was gone, but was still hopeful for a miracle. I didn't immediately go to the hospital because of his condition, and a few days later, on that Friday, my daughter and I decided to go and visit him. When we got into my vehicle, my phone synced to the Bluetooth of my vehicle. At the time, I didn't realize what song was playing. I just thought it was a song on my songs list, not the playlist I had created, which it normally would play, not just some random song. I found it weird but didn't think much of it. I shut the radio off so my daughter and I could chat while we drove to the hospital. Because I've never been in a situation of someone being admitted into ICU and what it means when someone dies, I was naive to the whole process. When we got to the hospital, the nurse told us to go and talk to his daughter. I just couldn't understand why. Call me stupid, but I just couldn't understand. I just wanted to go and see him. I then called his daughter, and she said, "He's gone." They pulled him off life support that morning, and I was in complete shock. No tears, just shocked. She ended up consoling me instead of me consoling her. My daughter and I then went back to the vehicle. Again, the audio turned on when I started the vehicle, and again I shut it off, still not registering what was playing, but I heard it. At that time, I was more concerned about calling our mutual friends. I dropped my daughter off at home. I decided I needed to take a drive to be alone, so I went back to my vehicle, and again the song came on, but this time I left the music on. Still not really paying attention to what it was playing, I kept driving. By this time, tears were flowing uncontrollably down my cheeks. I was screaming out loud. How could you just leave us? How is this fair? I didn't even get to say goodbye. I was furious with him. I know it was self-pity, because I had just lost my best friend, my confidant, my partner in crime. It wasn't until I was at a stoplight and the lyrics, "I'll stand by you through your darkest hour," echoed. Then I finally took notice and realized what was happening. I had to pull over on the side of the road, and I couldn't stop crying. I truly believe that it was him trying to communicate with me. In that moment, I felt some comfort, knowing that he was still around. Thank you for your time. I have more stories, which I will send a little bit later. Regards, Christine. Our next story of the night comes to us from Elsa, and Elsa's story is called The Mysterious Taps. Elsa says, "Hi. Honestly, I'm not a big believer of the paranormal, but I've always thought it was an interesting thought to entertain. However, a few weeks ago, something happened to me that really confused me, and honestly, trying to be a person who tries to be open to everything, I'm not unwilling to believe that it was something paranormal. Some nights, I am unable to sleep well. I don't know why, but as everyone has nights like that sometimes, I don't give them much thought. I was having one of these nights where I slept restlessly. I was rolling around. My bed is in the corner of my room, and I think it was around 2 a.m. when this happened. I was rolling around quite a bit, and I remember turning towards the wall and finally settling down when I felt someone or something tap my shoulder twice. It wasn't hard or anything, and this sounds strange coming from me, but it felt like whatever was tapping me wasn't trying to get my attention or anything, but just to turn back over. I remember just lying frozen for a moment, thinking about what could have tapped me so distinctly, but nothing came to mind. Nothing was in a position to tap me, and no one could have tapped me and gotten out of my sight so fast and without making a sound. I then turned over, and no one was there. I have never had sleep paralysis, so I highly doubt it could have been that. I didn't feel very scared in the moment, though for some reason, I went right back to sleep. I was then woken up a little bit later because a cup I had sitting on my windowsill had been knocked down. Nothing could have knocked it down, and it confused me. I know this was not some dream I imagined because when I woke up in the morning again, the cup was still on the floor. Again, I am not sure if I believe in the paranormal, but this was definitely something that seemed to form a link. This wasn't a big story, but it was very creepy, and I certainly think it involved something paranormal. Thanks, Elsa." Our next story of the night comes to us from M, and M's story is called Friendly Visitors While Waking Up. M says, "Hi there. I just started listening to your podcast, and I'm hooked. I've always liked the paranormal, cryptozoology, and unexplained, so this is the perfect podcast for me, except when I'm thinking about the creepy stories at night. Anyway, I have 3 weird occurrences that happened to me while living in my now husband and I's house after graduating from college. These happened when he was out of town, and I had to sleep in the house by myself, which I hated. The first one happened after my childhood dog, Sammy, passed away. He was a great dog, and I always felt very close to him. It was a week or so after he had passed, and the few times that he did sleep with me, usually during a thunderstorm, he would sleep by my legs, right next to my shins. I remember very distinctly waking up because I felt a pressure or warmth on my legs, and my first thought was that it was Sammy. After thinking this, and about to drift back to sleep, I then woke up remembering that Sammy had never even been to my house, and he had died a week ago. Instead of feeling scared, I felt very comforted, and felt like he was snuggling me one last time before crossing the Rainbow Bridge. The second incident happened when waking up to my grandmother's voice. She had passed away several years ago, and it was one of those weird feelings where you knew the voice, but had not heard it in so long. She had passed away from Alzheimer's, so she did not say very much towards the last years of her life, but hearing her voice, it sounded clear, and she was singing a song with my name in it, which she sometimes did. She sounded happy, and hearing her say my name brought tears to my eyes, because I had not heard it in so long. The third and final incident, and really my last encounter with the paranormal or otherworldly, was from entities I do not know. I remember waking up and hearing what I imagined to be two children giggling, and I distinctly remember one of them saying, "Shh, you're going to wake her." This was something that really scared me, as I do not know who these beings would have been. Maybe children that had lived in the house before us. It was an older house, and I do not think that anyone had passed away there. I remember being scared, but then not feeling like I needed to run away, because I felt in my heart that they were not there to hurt me, and that they were friendly. I sometimes think maybe Sammy, my grandmother, and these children are together playing and happy. It brings a smile to my face. We only lived in that house for 2 years, and I have not had any encounters since. But I am open to the friendly kind. Thanks. Love your podcast. M. As tonight's edition of Midweek Mysteries comes to an end, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And a special thank you goes out to Olga, Chris, Daniel, Christine, Elsa, and M for sharing their experiences. If you'd like to share your thoughts or similar experience with one of tonight's storytellers, please email me and I'll be sure to forward your message on to them. If you've witnessed something that you can't explain, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit us at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. And until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Friday with our next episode. From all of us at Paranormal Mysteries, thank you for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.